Hi, my name is Tiana McGee. I am in the English Composition 1 class, and my professor name is Cassie Rocket Rogers. The name of my essay is Injustice Argument of Essay. The slaves went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, then moved back again toward slavery. W.B. Du Bois in 1935. This is a powerful quote from his book, Black Reconstruction. What he meant was black people was freed, briefly experienced the possibility of equality, and then were pushed into a new system that mimicked slavery. Jim Crow laws, lynching, and segregations are a few of the many examples of how African Americans were not free. W.B. Du Bois believed in fighting for equality and demanding change right away, while Booker T. Washington believed that African Americans should prove themselves as worthy. I believe that W.B. Du Bois' approach was most efficient. Booker T. Washington's approach to injustice was to focus on higher education and economic stability. In his 1985 Atlanta Compromise speech, Booker T. Washington advocated for vocational training for African Americans. He wanted African American people to focus on finding trades, practical skills, and practical skills and becoming financially independent. I understand his approach. However, given the time and climate of the 1800s and 1900s, I will argue that his approach was not efficient. During that time, African Americans faced many devastating adversities. Again, Jim Crow laws, segregation, and lynching, with limited resources. They did not have access to schools and money. They faced poverty and racial violence daily. These conditions created an environment where economic progress was nearly impossible to achieve without first fighting against injustice. Unlike Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois believed that African Americans could not wait for rights to gradually be granted. They needed to demand full civil equality immediately. One of the ways to demand equality was activism. Activism was one of the most powerful forces behind ending injustice faced by African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement. Activists challenged racial laws and forced the governments to respond. W.E.B. Du Bois' leadership organized marches, sit-ins, boycotts, and protests. Civil rights activists like W.B. Du Bois made it clear that segregation, racism, and discriminations were unacceptable. By resisting openly and publicly, activists changed public attitudes and inspired people to join in. His leadership also helped found the NAACP, an organization dedicated to legally fighting discrimination and racial violence. Rather than relying on protests and boycotts, the NAACP believed that the courtroom was another tool for achieving equality. They targeted laws, specific laws that supported segregation, inequality, education, and discrimination. They filed lawsuits against these laws violated the Constitution, especially the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. These are a few of the many different approaches of W.B. Du Bois to demand equality. I believe that W.B. Du Bois' approach was more efficient than Booker T. Washington's. I believe this because he confronted an injustice directly instead of proving that he and the black community is worthy of equality. Focusing on vocational training and economic independence did help some African Americans gain skills and stability, but it simply wasn't enough in the world of Jim Crow laws, segregation, and constant threats of racial violence. This strategy was dependent on the idea that white society would eventually reward black people for their hard work. W.B. Du Bois understood that without civil rights, legal protection, and access to higher education, black Americans would always be held back. No matter how skilled or hardworking they would never have the same rights unless they fought for it. His push for immediate equality through the NAACP led to long-term change, including major legal wins like Brown versus Board of Education. Du Bois' approach created a pathway towards equality. That's why I see Du Bois' strategy as the one that made the greater impact. In conclusion, W.B. Du Bois demanding immediate equality and fighting injustice directly proved far more efficient than Booker T. Washington's stance. While Washington encouraged African Americans to focus on economic stability, the harsh realities of Jim Crow laws, segregation, and racial violence made progress nearly impossible without challenging the system itself. Real change required activism, legal challenges, along with higher education. Through his leadership in the NAACP and support for civil rights activism, Du Bois not only inspired African Americans to resist injustice openly, but also created lasting equal and social changes. In conclusion, and basically to give a brief synopsis of what I read, ultimately Du Bois' strategy confronted injustice directly through activism and led to long-lasting legal social changes. His approach led to a path towards true equality rather than gradual acceptance.